Hi students and learning coaches, welcome back to Literature and Comprehension. We're going to continue working in Unit 22. The title of our unit is 3. We have already done lessons 1, 2, and 3, and today we're going to do lesson 4, which is a review lesson of the 3 bears. So I'm going to go ahead and open up that lesson. While I'm opening up that lesson, you need to go and get the following supplies. You will need your lesson guide. And you can also use the online lesson guide, which is what I'm going to use, but if not, you can use the lesson guide. We're going to be on page 458 in the Literature and Comprehension part of this lesson guide. You will also need your K-12 Read Aloud Treasury, where our story, The 3 Little Bears, is located. And today you will also need your Language Arts activity book, and we will be doing a page out of the activity book, and I will show that to you online. So I'm going to give you just a moment to go and gather your supplies, and then we'll get started. Now that you've gathered your supplies, we'll continue on with our lesson. We're going to do 3 parts in our lesson today. The Get Ready part. This is where you will review the new words or reread the story. If you're doing this lesson on a different day than we did lessons 2 and 3, you may want to go back and go over the brand new words in the story and reread the story. If you choose to reread the story, that's great. It's a great way to work on comprehension. We're also going to be moving on into reading for meaning, where we're going to have your students are going to be retelling the 3 bears, and then we're going to move to the part of the lesson called Making Connections, where we're going to talk about a story map and how your students can fill out a story map that will tell who, where, and what is going on in a story. So let's get started. Once again, if you need to reread the story, I will pause right now. You can go over the new words, peep and porridge. You can do a book walk through the story, and you can have your students sit by you as you reread the 3 bears. So I'll pause for a moment for you to do that. We will now move on to our next activity, the Reading for Meaning activity. And in this activity, you're going to have your students retell the 3 bears. And this is done for you to be able to check their understanding of a story by retelling it in their own words. When good readers retell a story, they tell the most important things that happen in the beginning of the story, the middle of the story, and the end of the story. And you want to make sure that your students are mentioning the characters that are in the story and the things that the characters are doing. So here's some questions that you may want to ask your student. First question. In what part of the story does Mama Bear make porridge? Now you may want to give your students some choices. You may want to ask, did that happen in the beginning of the story? Did that happen in the middle of the story? Or did that happen at the end of the story? That may be a great way to get them started on this skill. So I'm going to pause for a moment, and students, tell your learning coach what part of the story Mama Bear was making porridge. Okay? If your student told you that Mama Bear was making porridge at the beginning of the story, and then the 3 bears go for a walk while they wait for it to cool off, that is correct. That is what happened in the beginning of our story. You want to make sure your student understands the beginning. You may also want to open up the story and show them what you're talking about when you're saying the beginning of the story. Next question. In what part of the story does Goldilocks try things out at the bear's house? Once again, learning coaches, you can give your students choices. Did that happen in the beginning of the story? Did that happen in the middle of the story? Or did that happen at the end of the story? Give the students a few minutes to answer that question. Students, if you told your learning coach that happened in the middle of the story, you are correct. Retell to your learning coach what happened in the middle of the story. We'll pause for a moment and allow you to do that. If you told your learning coach that Goldilocks comes into the bear's house and eats a bowl of porridge, or she sits in the chairs and tries them all out, and then goes upstairs to take a nap, those are all activities that took place in the middle of our story, The 3 Bears. Once again, learning coaches, if your students struggled with telling you where these activities took place in the beginning, middle, or end of the story, then go back to the story and let them look at that part or reread that part of the story to them. Next question. In what part of the story do the bears come home? Do they come home in the beginning of the story? Do they come home in the middle of the story, or do they come home at the end of the story? Students, tell your learning coaches the answer to that. If you told your learning coach that they came home at the end of the story, you are correct. Now, I want you to retell that part of the story, retell the end part of the story to your learning coach. If you told your learning coach that the bears come home and they can see that someone's been eating their food and sitting in their chairs, and then they go upstairs and they find Goldilocks in Baby Bear's bed, she wakes up, she gets scared and runs away, any of those answers would be correct. Once again, learning coaches, if your students had a hard time being able to retell any parts of the story, beginning, middle, or end, you may want to go back, reread the story, and show them exactly what we mean when we say the beginning of a story, the middle of the story, and the end of the story. And this is an activity that you can do with any of their storybooks to practice this skill. Just choose a storybook that they're familiar with or that's their favorite, and then you can talk about beginning, middle, and end, and allow them to retell the story in their own words. All right, we're going to move on to the next activity. And in this activity, you're going to need your language arts activity book. You're going to need, let me find it. You're going to need this page right here. That is page 65. And you can print it off the computer, or you can tear it out of your language arts activity book. Okay, during this activity, we're going to be talking about a story map, and a story map is a way of organizing the story. So let's look at it, and let me show you what I mean. We're going to complete the story map, where I'm going to talk through this, and then learning coaches, after the lesson is over, then you can go and do this activity with your student. This is to review the three bears using a story map or a graphic organizer. Just helps organize the information in the story so that your students can understand it. So we'll first look at the very first box, and it says characters. So boys and girls, you need to tell your learning coach who are the characters in the three bears. We're going to talk through this, and you can fill this out after we are finished with our lesson. If you said Mama Bear or Baby Bear or Daddy Bear or Goldilocks, all of those were characters in our story. The setting, the next part of our story map or our graphic organizer, is the setting. Where did the story take place? Tell your learning coach where the story took place. Once again, students, if you told your learning coach that the story took place in the woods, or in a house in the woods, or in the bear's house, then those are all correct answers. Learning coaches, if they struggle with telling you the characters or the setting, once again, go back to your story, open it up, and let them locate the characters and let them look to see what the setting of the story is. Once again, the title of the story is The Three Bears. We're going to move on and look at the plot. We want to know what happened at the beginning of the story. We want to know what happened in the middle of the story. We want to know what happened at the end of the story. So we can start at the beginning of the story. And learning coaches, you can let your students retell the beginning of the story. And after our class, you can write down some of the things that they say. Once again, the beginning of the story is Goldilocks comes into the bear's house, and she sees porridge on the tables cooling, and she begins to try it out. And then in the middle of the story, tell your learning coach what happens. She goes and sits in the chairs. Before she did that, she ate the porridge. She sat in the chair. She broke Baby Bear's chair. She ran upstairs, tried out all the beds. And then at the end of the story, you can tell your learning coach what happened at the end of the story. At the end of the story, the bears come home. They notice that someone's been in their house eating their food, trying out their chairs. They go upstairs, and they find Goldilocks asleep in Baby Bear's bed. She wakes up when she hears Baby Bear's voice. She sees the bear. She gets scared. She runs down the stairs, and out the door she goes. So once again, students, There's no one correct answer. Just think about what was happening at the beginning of the story, what was happening in the middle of the story, and what was happening at the end of the story, and fill out your story map or graphic organizer, which would be a great way for learning coaches to see that your students are comprehending stories that you read to them. If they have finished, once they have finished that activity, then you can go back in and mark lesson 4 complete. And that concludes our lessons on the 3 bears. Thank you so much for participating in my lesson today. Have a great evening.